What if the man who offered you marriage didn't do it for love? And what if you said yes, not for safety, but because you saw something in him even he thought was lost forever? In a town where reputation is everything and mercy is rare, one woman agrees to a marriage of convenience, but what they build together becomes anything but convenient. Stick around, because what begins as survival turns into something worth fighting for. The snow hadn't stopped for 3 days. Outside the cabin, the world had turned to white silence, the kind that swallows up everything you ever thought was solid. Inside, Nora Walker pressed her palms against the warm sides of her mug, steam curling up into her face as she sat alone by the hearth. The knock came at dusk, not urgent, not desperate, just steady, like someone who had made up their mind and wouldn't leave until they were answered. She opened the door with her rifle already raised. "Evening, Miss Walker," the man said, tipping his hat. Snow dusted the brim, and his coat was too thin for the storm. "Name's Eli. I reckon you remember me." She narrowed her eyes. "I remember you working with Sheriff Tillman." "I did." He paused. "Don't anymore?" He looked like a man with something to lose. That made him dangerous. "What do you want?" she asked. "A proposal." She barked a laugh. "That's rich. You bring a ring or just the nerve?" He didn't smile. "I need a wife. You need to keep this land." His voice was low even. "The bank's coming for it by spring." Her lips tightened. He knew. Everyone knew. Ever since her brother died, and her father before that, they circled like buzzards. "I'm not wearing your name like some badge," she said coldly. Eli didn't flinch. "You'd keep the house. Keep the land. I'd keep my distance. We'd sign what we need to. It's not about love, Nora." "No, it never is with men like you." He nodded, accepting the blow. "Then, it's this, or watch them take everything your daddy built." That hit harder than she expected. They talked more that night. Not of feelings, but boundaries, terms. She made him promise 3 things. No touching without asking, no speaking for her in town, and no lies ever. He agreed. By morning, they'd signed the papers. 2 witnesses, a farmhand and old Miss Ruth from the chapel, stood silent as Reverend Gray read the vows in Nora's frost-bitten barn. She didn't wear white. She didn't smile. But when the Reverend asked if she took this man, she said, "I take what's mine." The wind picked up outside. Somewhere far off, the world kept spinning, but inside the barn, something had shifted. Eli tipped his hat again. "Thank you," he said. Nora didn't answer. She just walked back inside, boots heavy, heart heavier. Marriage meant nothing to her, not anymore, but it might buy her time, and that, she'd learned, was worth more than gold. The storm had eased by morning, but the cold hadn't. Nora lit the stove before the sun had even touched the frozen hills. Eli sat at the edge of her kitchen table like he didn't belong. Because he didn't. Not really. He didn't say much that first week. Just split wood, hauled water, fixed the hinge on the barn door without being asked. She didn't thank him, and he didn't expect her to. Still, something about him itched at her. A man like that didn't just quit being a deputy. He wasn't broken enough to be running, and he wasn't kind enough to be staying out of charity. "You ever gonna tell me why you came here?" she asked one night, pouring coffee without offering it. Eli glanced up from the newspaper she hadn't read in years. "You mean why I offered marriage, or why I left the badge behind?" "Both." He paused, folding the paper slowly. Sheriff Tillman turned a blind eye to a hanging that never should have happened. Said the boy stole a horse. Truth is, he was just too loud in the wrong saloon. "You spoke up?" "I buried him." Silence fell between them like a dropped hammer. "That boy was my sister's son," he added, voice low. Nora stared at him, the mug warm in her hands suddenly gone cold. "You buried him, then buried yourself?" Eli looked her straight in the eyes. "I couldn't stay in that town, but I also couldn't forget what it took from me." For the first time since their quiet arrangement began, she saw the man beneath the coat and hat. Grief shaped his edges. Maybe it shaped hers too. She nodded once, then went back to washing dishes. Later that night, she found her old wedding band in a drawer. She hadn't touched it since she buried her first husband in a shallow grave near the creek. Another good man broken by a bad world. She turned the ring in her fingers, but didn't put it on. Not for Eli. Not yet. The next morning, town came knocking. Mrs. Caldwell from the mercantile stood on the porch with a basket of bread and a mouthful of questions. "We heard you married that Eli fella," she said, eyes darting behind Nora's shoulder. "Didn't even tell the Reverend till the day of." Nora held the door just wide enough to speak through. "Didn't realize I owed the town my private decisions?" "Oh, honey," Mrs. Caldwell said sweetly, "it ain't about owing. It's about appearances." Nora raised a brow. "Then they should mind how they look spying through my windows." Mrs. Caldwell huffed and handed her the bread. "Well, the ladies of the church are concerned. A woman alone, now not so alone, with a stranger under her roof. It'll stir talk." "Let 'em stir," Nora said. "Might keep 'em warm through winter." She shut the door and didn't wait for a reply. Inside, Eli was chopping carrots. He didn't ask. He didn't smile. But when she passed by, he offered her the knife. They cooked in silence. That night, as the fire cracked and wind moaned like a dying animal across the plain, Nora stood at the window watching snow pile up against the fence. She spoke without turning. "I don't care what they say in town, but if you lie to me, Eli, we're done." His voice was steady behind her. "You'll get truth, whether you want it or not." Something about that, blunt, honest, unforgiving, was more comforting than all the false kindness she'd endured over the years. She turned from the window. "Good, because they'll come sniffing again. And next time, they won't bring bread." Eli nodded. "Let 'em come." Outside, the wind howled. But inside that little cabin, two strangers shared warmth neither of them knew they needed. And though they hadn't said it yet, not out loud, something had begun to shift. This wasn't just a marriage of convenience anymore. It was becoming something else, something real. It was near dusk when the knock came. Not a soft tap, not a neighbor's courtesy, a heavy, slow pound, like judgment dressed in snow-drenched boots. Eli reached for the rifle resting behind the door without saying a word. Nora beat him to it. "I'll answer," she said. He didn't argue. When she opened the door, the wind shoved its way in first, sharp, bitter, and full of warning. Then came the man, tall, thin as a whip but dressed in fine wool. And under his hat, those pale blue eyes Nora thought she'd buried with her past. "Hello, Nora." Her heart dropped to her boots. "Marshall Whit Moreland," she said, voice dry as winter dust. Eli stiffened beside her. The name meant something to him, too. Moreland took off his hat and stepped inside like he still had permission. "Didn't expect to find you here," he said to Eli. "Heard you vanished." "Didn't realize I was being followed," Eli replied, jaw tight. Moreland chuckled, but his smile never reached his eyes. Nora didn't sit. She didn't offer coffee. She stood like a tree rooted deep in scorched earth. "What do you want?" she asked. Moreland's eyes flicked around the cabin, the stove, the two plates on the table, the second pair of boots by the door. "I came to warn you," he said finally. "You're harboring a man with a federal warrant." Nora crossed her arms. "I'm married to a man." "Marriage don't erase crimes," Moreland said. "Neither does a badge," Eli fired back. They stared each other down. The air in the cabin thickened like old blood. Moreland looked to Nora again, softer this time. "You know what he did?" "I know what the world did to him." That silenced the room. Outside, the sky bruised into night. Coyotes cried somewhere beyond the ridge. Moreland sighed, reached into his coat, and dropped a sealed envelope on the table. "Town council's been stirring. Says Nora Harrow broke moral code by marrying in secret. Says the land's not safe in her hands anymore." She picked up the envelope without opening it. Her fingers didn't tremble. "They want the farm," she said flatly. "They want quiet," Moreland corrected. "And Eli's name brings noise." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. "You've always been trouble, Nora. I admired that once." "Still do," she said. "That's why you came alone." He didn't deny it. Then he vanished into the dark. That night, Eli stood by the fire sharpening his knife. Not because he needed it, but because it gave his hands something to do. Nora watched him in silence, then finally said, "He wasn't always like that." "I can see that," Eli said. "I loved him once." "I know." More silence, then, "Do you want to leave?" Eli looked up. eyes steady. "I'm tired of running," he said. "If they come, we stand." Nora nodded. No grand speeches, no false hope. Just two people who'd been carved by loss and fire, deciding together not to bend again. She opened the envelope. Inside were signatures, legal threats, demands that her land be transferred to the town's trust if deemed morally compromised. She dropped it into the flames. It curled like a dry leaf and turned to ash. In the morning they rode to town, not in hiding, not with fear. Side by side, hat brims low, spines straight as fence posts. They didn't speak much on the ride, didn't need to, but when they stepped onto Main Street, boots hitting wood with deliberate weight, people stopped, stared, judged. Nora Harrow, the widow with fire in her bones, and Eli Hayes, the ex-deputy who never bowed. They walked to the mayor's office, to the sheriff's desk, to the church if need be. And with every door they opened, they said the same thing. "We're not for sale." They didn't come in secret. They came in broad daylight. 6 men on horseback, led by Reverend Ellison, his silver cross swinging like a blade from his neck. The others were ranchers, merchants, and a deputy who'd lost too many card games to Eli Hayes back in the day. They called themselves a council of decency. Nora watched them from the front porch, her shotgun resting across her lap. She didn't flinch, just leaned back in the rocking chair her husband built before he died. Eli stood behind her, silent but ready. "Afternoon, gentlemen," Nora said, her voice calm as a still pond. "Mrs. Harrow," Ellison nodded, dismounting. "We came to speak peacefully." "Uninvited peace doesn't sit well on this land," she replied. The Reverend's jaw twitched. "Then I'll speak plain. You married a man with a bounty on his head. You've refused to comply with town orders, and now you're inciting unrest." Eli stepped forward, hands at his sides. "I didn't start the fire," he said. "I just walked through the smoke." One of the men, Graham the banker, spat into the dirt. "You've got the whole town on edge. Good people worried about what comes next." "Then maybe the good people should stop standing behind bad ones," Nora said sharply. The tension cracked like dry timber. Reverend Ellison took a slow breath, trying to collect whatever authority he still carried. "We're here to remove the threat, legally. No paper brought," Eli said. "No badge shown," Nora added. "You came with rope and fire in your eyes," she finished. The men didn't answer. They didn't have to. The torches were still unlit, but the threat was thick in the air. Then Nora stood. "All right," she said. "You want to burn my home? Burn it." The men blinked. "But know this, we'll be inside. And if the match drops, it won't just be wood-catching flame. It'll be every lie you ever told, every land deed you forged, every child you left hungry while you fattened your pockets in God's name." Ellison's mouth opened, then closed again. Words failed him. Eli stepped beside her, his voice low but strong. "This land's defended, not just by us, by the truth." Silence stretched. Then the youngest of the men, Thomas Reed, the sheriff's nephew, turned his horse around without a word. Another followed, then a third. Finally, only Ellison remained. He looked at Nora like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as a widow, not as a woman, but as a line in the earth that would not move. "You'll regret this," he said. "Already lived through worse," she replied. That night the wind rose, not wild but whispering, like it carried stories. Nora sat by the fire, the shotgun still nearby. Eli poured 2 fingers of whiskey and handed her a glass. "You think that's the last of them?" he asked. "No," she said. He didn't press further. Instead, he reached into a satchel he hadn't touched in weeks and pulled out a worn envelope. Inside were documents, maps, names, signed letters from federal agents. Proof. "This was what I was bringing west," he said. "Testimony against half the men running this territory." She studied the papers. Quiet. "If we take this to the right ears," he continued, "they'll hang each other before the law ever reaches them." She looked up at him, firelight dancing in her eyes. "And if we don't?" she asked. "They'll come anyway." She folded the papers gently, then placed them in the iron box beneath the floorboards. Then let them come. After his brother's death, Eli had found these documents hidden in an old tobacco box. Names, signatures, and deeds that told the story no one wanted spoken. The snow came heavy that night, thick, silencing. It covered the roads, the fences, the sins, but not the truth. Inside the cabin, Nora laid out the documents Eli, had carried across 3 territories. Land deeds marked with forged names, military orders counterfeited, testimonies from farmers who'd been burned out, pushed off land by men who claimed to be saving the valley. Names jumped off the page. Ellison, Graham, even the judge. Nora read them one by one, her fingers trembling, not from cold, but from clarity. "They did this," she whispered. "They did worse," Eli said. "Whole families disappeared. They'll kill to keep this buried." He nodded. "They already have." Silence fell again, thick like the snow pressing against the window panes. Finally she stood. "Then let's dig it up." By sunrise they were riding to town. Nora wore her husband's coat and her father's rifle across her back. Eli looked like a ghost come back to haunt the place that betrayed him, cleaned up, steady, and more dangerous for it. The town was quiet. Too quiet. They didn't head for the sheriff's office. They didn't bother with the judge. They went to the church. Sunday morning, the pews were full. Ellison was mid-sermon, preaching fire and brimstone to people half asleep or half afraid. When Nora stepped inside, heads turned like a wind had blown through. Eli followed, a leather satchel in hand. "Reverend," she called, voice sharp and clear. "Mind if I say a few words?" Ellison's face paled, but he didn't answer fast enough. Eli stepped up to the pulpit, uninvited, unforgiven, unafraid. He dropped the satchel on the podium and pulled out a bundle of pages. "This valley is built on stolen land," he began. "Stolen from the dead, and from the ones you didn't kill, just ruined." Gasps, murmurs. A few folks stood, others sat frozen. These are deeds, contracts, letters, names of every man who signed off on burning homes and bearing the truth. He held up a paper. "Here's Judge Kemper's signature, and this one's Graham, and here, Reverend Ellison himself." The Reverend tried to speak. "This is slander." "You signed it," Nora shouted. She held up a document with Ellison's exact handwriting. A land transfer logged the same week 3 families vanished. "You called it God's will," she spat, "while you lined your pockets and dug graves." The room was a storm now. Chaos, fear, anger. A woman in the back wept. A man shouted. Someone threw a Bible. Eli didn't flinch. "You don't have to believe me. Take the papers. Read them. Share them. But don't pretend you didn't know anymore." Nora added, "You can turn your heads today, but if you do, don't call yourselves neighbors tomorrow." Then they left, through the front door. Not arrested, not stopped. Just watched, like ghosts walking out of a town that finally saw its own reflection and recoiled. That night, the valley didn't sleep. Some burned the documents, others copied them. But the story spread like wind through dry grass. Nora and Eli returned to the ranch, knowing peace wouldn't follow them home. Not yet. As they sat under the porch's eave, coffee warming their hands, Eli spoke first. "You did more than I ever could." "You handed me the shovel," she said. "I just didn't stop digging." He smiled, tired but real. "You ready for what comes next?" She looked out into the dark, where the hills rose like buried secrets waiting to be named. "I'm ready for anything," she said, "as long as I'm not doing it alone." At first, the room stayed quiet. Then old Mr. Latham stood up, voice shaking. "I signed that paper. I didn't know what it meant then, but I know now." One by one, others stood too. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to shift the wind. 3 days later, they came at dawn. Not the townsfolk, not the sheriff. No one who cared about sermons or signatures. These were riders. 6 of them. Hard men with dull eyes and clean guns. The kind you didn't see until it was too late. The kind who didn't ask questions. Hired hands sent to erase a problem. Nora saw them first, out by the ridge. Just silhouettes at first. Then boots, spurs, rifles. "They're here," she said, not turning from the window. Eli stood slowly, still favoring the ribs that hadn't fully healed. "It's not the whole town." "No," Nora said. "Just the part that can't afford to let the truth live." They didn't run. They didn't hide. They had prepared. Tripwire under snow, barrels of oil near the fence, rifle holes in the barn wall, a thin line of firewood stacked like a barricade. Nora loaded the Winchester. Eli rolled back his sleeve, revealing the jagged scar just above his wrist. "Last time I faced men like this," he said, "I thought I was dying." "You were," she replied, handing him a pistol. "But not today." The riders came slow, careful. The man in front, a tall one with silver hair and a voice like smoke, called out, "We just want the man." "Hand him over," and we walk away. Nora stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. Her coat flapped in the wind. Her eyes held steady. "He's not yours to take." "You're protecting a dead man," the rider said, lifting a wanted poster. "Says so right here." "Then go on," Nora said. "Try arresting a ghost." The man's lip curled. "You know how this ends." "I do," she said, "with me standing over your grave." The shootout started sharp and sudden. Nora dropped the first man. Clean shot through the collarbone. He didn't get back up. Eli fired from the barn, covering her flank. Two riders tried to circle behind, but the tripwire took one's horse down hard. The rider screamed as he hit the ground. The other didn't even slow, just aimed for the house. Nora rolled off the porch and into the snow, firing twice. One shot missed, the other didn't. Gunpowder filled the air. Smoke curled from the barn. The riders regrouped, but it was too late. The ranch fought back like it had teeth. When it was over, 4 men lay dead in the snow. One crawled away, bleeding, never looking back. The last man, the silver-haired leader, stood alone, gun empty, breath ragged. Eli stepped out, bleeding from the shoulder, but standing tall. "This is the last time," he said. "Tell them." The man spat blood into the snow. "They'll just send more." "Then tell them this," Nora said, stepping beside Eli. "Next time, we won't bury the bodies." The man didn't reply. He staggered to his horse and rode off without another word. They buried the dead in silence. No prayers, just dirt and wind. When it was done, Nora stood at the edge of the field, arms crossed, watching the sky shift from gray to pale blue. Eli came up beside her, his hand brushing hers. "Still think it was a mistake?" he asked. She shook her head. I think it was the only thing that made sense." They stood there a while, the cabin at their backs, the land before them scarred but theirs. "You think we'll be left alone now?" he asked. "No," she said, "but maybe now they'll think twice." He smiled at that, not wide, but true. Spring came late that year. The snow melted slow, revealing the bruised earth beneath. Nora planted again, beans, corn, tomatoes. Eli rebuilt the fence, one post at a time. No one from town came to check on them. No preachers, no riders, just the wind. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't howl. It hummed, like something healing, like the land breathing again. The town had tried to bury them in shame, but together they dug up something stronger. Truth and the courage to live by it. And inside the cabin, 2 people, no longer strangers, shared coffee, silence, and the kind of peace that only comes when you've buried the past and survived to see something better rise in its place. And so, across these unforgiving lands, another tale drifts away with the wind. If this quiet courage, this stubborn heart touched you in any way, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this story on to someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe, because out here there are still so many truths left to tell. Each one carved from pain, hope, and dust. This is Wild West Stories. Thank you for watching.